Well, we're here today with Michelle from O'Sullivan Johanson Lawyers.
Thank you.
Michelle, thank you for your time.
Thank you for the invitation.
We've asked you down to help provide a bit of information and to clarify what actually takes place when there's been a request for the early release of a deposit.
Okay, so generally a vendor will ask for a Section 27 to access their deposit because they might have bought another property and they'll need to pay a deposit, or they might be buying their caravan for their retirement travelling around Australia.
Sure.
So the first process is to ascertain if their title has got a mortgage or a charge on it. If there's no mortgage or title, or no mortgage or charge on the title, it's a very straightforward process. There's a pro forma form filled out, it's provided to the purchaser. They've got 28 days to either object or consent, and I'll explain a little bit more about that.
Sure.
The next difficulty with it is if you've got a mortgage on your title, you need some information from your bank about what that mortgage is, how much is owing, are you in default, when's it due to be paid in full, and once you get that information you can then give the Section 27 form to the purchaser.
If I can interject there, who's responsible for, there's a lot of information to be gathered, is that you guys that do that?
So generally the solicitors and conveyancers. A vendor might try and go to the bank and get the information themselves. 95% of the time the bank will say we can't give that to you, you need to go back to your lawyer or conveyancer to get that information. So it takes time. It's not, it could take about a fortnight. Once we put the formal request into the bank, they might take a fortnight to give us the information to finish the form. Well,
that was going to be my next question. From the time that someone decides, yes, we'd like to apply to have our deposit released, is it 2 months? Is it a month? Is it 4? How does it work?
So once someone puts a request to us to do a Section 27, if we've got to get information from the bank, we send the request up to the bank. As a general rule, I say 2 weeks, but a bank can take longer, can be quicker. Once you get the information, you fill out the form. That's a half a day, should be done within the same day. It's then got to go to the purchaser solicitor, and they have up to 28 days to decide whether they'll sign it or not. So you can try and hurry that process, but sometimes they will take their full 28 days.
Sure. So as much as it's, you've attempted to simplify it a little, it's still a reasonably complex scenario, isn't it? So it's very important, I'd imagine, for both parties to be fully informed and to ask lots of questions about what their obligations are.
Correct, and what makes them complicated is when the purchaser gets it, whether they consent or object to the deposit being released. And this is where vendors get upset, frustrated or confused with the process. They think they can have it straight away, but the purchaser's got a couple of reasons why they might say no. First example is if the vendor has to still do something, or there's a condition in the contract for the benefit of the purchaser. It's still subject to finance, or the vendor might have promised to repair the broken window in the back door. If that's not done, the purchaser is allowed to say, no, I'm not consenting until that's done. The other reason why they can oppose is if the information from the bank shows the level of your debt is greater than 80% of the sale price, they can object. So
that's an important point.
And if it is more than 80%, they have a valid reason to object, and then you can't get access. So vendors can't always think it's their automatic right to have it.
Yes, in simplistic terms, it's not guaranteed.
No, definitely not. So you always need to have a plan B in case the the purchaser chooses to object.
Okay. If it is agreed upon and consent has been given, is it the whole of the deposit that gets released generally?
Generally, what will happen is the whole deposit's released, but what will happen is the agent will take their proportion for their sales and commission, and the proportion that's held in the trust account of the solicitor will then be released to the vendor.
Sure.
So it is the full amount, but generally the vendor doesn't get access to the full amount unless they make an alternative arrangement with their agent.
Well, I guess as we said a little earlier, it's a reasonably complex scenario, but it can work to help certainly the person that's selling the property if they have their circumstances where they need access to be able to pay a deposit on their next move. I have no doubt you'd recommend though that just to make sure they're asking plenty of questions and seek their own independent advice. And
start the process early. If it's something you need, start that early on so it happens, because people think, I've requested it, I'll have it in a week. It can take 6 weeks, so you need to make sure you ask early for it.
Well, some fantastic advice. Michelle, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure that's gone a long way down the track of explaining just what takes place when you want the early release of your deposit.